everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And, I wasn't necessarily planning on jumping on live tonight, but, there were a couple of news items today that I thought were of interest to Minnesota Vikings fans. One, a former draft pick of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is being cut, and the other one, we got the official news on Rondale Moore. So I thought, well, you know what? When there's Vikings news, this is what we do around here. So why don't we break those moves down, what they mean, what they say about the linebacking group, the wide receiving core, and where the Vikings will go from here. Plus, of course, taking your questions and comments. And also, I recorded a segment with Maggie Robinson as well for later on in the show. And she's got some headlines and some quarterbacks around the league in preseason to talk about. So let's get right into it. I mean, the biggest news of the day is that Rondale Moore is indeed out for the season. We all knew it the minute that it happened. The second that he went down and then the cart came out, it looked like it was a season-ending injury. And when Kevin O'Connell called it heartbreaking, then you had a pretty good sense for what had happened to Rondale Moore, and he will now be out for the season. There was maybe some hope that, hey, maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought and he could come back, but no, they announced today that he will be out for the entire season. So that means that the wide receiver room, as it is constructed at this second, is Jefferson, Addison out for the first 3 weeks, then Jalen Naylor, and it looks to me like Lucky Jackson and everybody else outside of Ty Felton is competing for spots on the practice squad. And if they want to go out and get another wide receiver, then there's an opening there with Rondale Moore being placed on season-ending injury reserve that they could bring in someone else. My thing about bringing in somebody else is if it is the middle of August, how good do you feel about a wide receiver dropping in with just a couple of weeks to go before the season starts in a offense that is not the easiest for wide receivers to pick up? And when we look at those guys that are still free agents, when we look at potential trade targets, Adam Thielen being one of them, of course, the conclusion that I usually come to is, doesn't all this sound a little bit like Michael Floyd, right? Remember in 2017, the Vikings picked up Michael Floyd, and all we did after that was talk about Michael Floyd is going to be their pure deep threat. Here's how he's going to fit in. He's going to do this, that, and the other thing, and so forth. And what ended up happening, he got a couple of catches, and that was it. And even Buffalo last year, when they traded for Amari Cooper, who's still out there now, everyone went crazy, including me. I thought, oh man, this is a really good trade for them. Well, it turned out that Amari Cooper wasn't able to come in and make the type of impact that the Buffalo Bills expected. And so when you look at a lot of these type of acquisitions that are the last minute, late in camp, and how many times has this happened? How about this? There was an entire, I've got a whole bevy of these. Maybe Aldrick Robinson might be the best one that they ever pulled off. And how many of you before the Vikings acquired Aldrick Robinson even knew who he was? And Josh Doxson got an entire press conference dedicated to him because he had played with Kirk Cousins before. So we threw 6 or 7 different questions at Kirk Cousins about Josh Doxson. I think he had one snap as a Minnesota Viking. The Tajay Sharp, the Kendall Wright. I mean, there's been this type of receiver who's done something in the past, and the Vikings kind of go out and pick him up and hope that there's something there. Very rarely is there. You're usually better off just relying on the guys that are there already in your camp because they've been building chemistry with the quarterback. They've been learning the offense. And I do like some of the ideas, and we'll get to comments and everything else soon. I do like some of the ideas when it comes to, going out and getting some players that maybe have been here before. So the Adam Thielen thing, I don't know if Carolina is going to move away from Adam Thielen, but when we talk about like a Tristan Jackson, somebody brought up, okay, I like that idea. KJ Osborne is a name that gets tossed out there from time to time. Who was the other name that somebody? Oh, and Brandon Powell. Brandon Powell, I think, would make a lot of sense to bring back unless they were just deeply unhappy with how Brandon Powell performed last year. But, I think he's a guy who could catch punts. He can run routes a little bit. He was the guy who caught the game winning pass in the Josh Dobbs game. I mean, like there's just not that many, there's not that many wide receivers who are going to be out there that know what they're doing enough to join KOC's offense and then to make an impact. So you may have to just survive the first couple of weeks, see if they can get Ty Felton involved in the offense, see if Lucky Jackson can do enough to make an impact. Possibly, Tristan Jackson's on IR too? Okay, I did not know that. Well, that's an idea off the table, but Brandon Powell and KJ Osborne, like those types who have been here before, would make some sense for the Vikings just because they're easy to plug and play. They're guys that can jump right back in, and they know the offense and they've been here before, so that would be helpful. But aside from that, unless there's some sort of big acquisition that they would be able to make, I have a tough time thinking that there's anyone outside of, a Trent Sherfield caliber type of player that they're going to be able to bring in to replace Rondale Moore. It's going to be somebody who gets cut down or somebody who is en route to getting cut from another team where maybe you're doing a 7th round pick swap in exchange or something for a player that somebody was going to cut anyway. But I don't really love most of the options. And when you think about, can you survive 3 games? And then Jordan Addison comes back. And it's also not like Jalen Naylor hasn't done this before. Yes, they do run a lot of 11 personnel, but it's not like they only run 11 personnel. And this third wide receiver spot is incredibly valuable to them. I mean, they have other personnel packages. They have the bigger tight ends. They have CJ Ham to throw in there. I don't think it's any reason to panic. I think the reaction for me for Rondale Moore going down is more just hurts for him because I had, and some of you guys saw the story, I had a conversation, sat down with Rondale Moore last week leading up to the game. And he was so excited about getting back. I mean, he had been through so much. He was reflective about all the things that they had learned, that he had learned kind of along the way when it came to going through that injury and seeing the game from a different perspective. And, also he talked about, I mean, of course, if he's a little guy, he's going to have a chip on his shoulder, but he talked a lot about, learning to have positive body language, positive attitude going forward. I think he's also saw it as kind of a last chance for him. And I asked Keenan McCardle about that for the story. I asked Keenan, I said, does this feel like a last shot for Rondale Moore? And he said, I don't know that because I can't, predict the future. But if I was going into this, then I would be viewing it as potentially my last shot. And he called Rondale Moore tough as nails. And, unfortunately, he ends up going out for the entire season. He is tough. I think that he's going to fight his way back to the NFL, and he's going to get another shot because he is an explosive player and he does have a lot of guts. It's just sometimes football is so harsh and so brutal, and that's what we saw. But I don't think the other side of that conversation is, they need to panic and go and run and go get another wide receiver. Maybe. So, people ask about every night about the Adam Thielen idea. And I really go back and forth when it comes to the Adam Thielen concept because I can see where you're coming from. Thielen can still catch the football. He knows the offense. It probably wouldn't take a lot to get him. And he's a veteran player who could help a young quarterback. All of that stuff checks the boxes. I don't know if Carolina's going to move him. My initial thought was, I don't know. Why would Carolina move him if they are trying to do everything they can for their young quarterback, Bryce Young, and they're trying to evaluate him? Wouldn't you want an extra wide receiver? But it is also possible that some other guys have beat him out in training camp, and then it's the next man up, and they would be willing to move him. So I'm not completely against it. I guess what I've seen, what I've thought is it's probably unlikely. But when you go around the league and go, well, who else could you get? who else is going to be a better option? Maybe there isn't one. Maybe that is something that they should consider. But I also think it's 3 games. Like, can you survive for 3 games, get through against the Chicago Bears, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Cincinnati Bengals? Like, get through those first 3 games, and then you get Jordan Addison back, and you should be good to go. From there, I think that they probably can. Also, maybe there's a part of me, and not just because he came on the show last night, and if you missed it, make sure you go watch it. But there's a part of me that really wants to see Lucky Jackson get his chance to be wide receiver 3, because for several years now, Lucky Jackson has been a guy that you go into training camp not thinking a whole lot about. You're like, okay, they picked up some XFL guy. Fantastic. I love that. Great. That's what I love the XFL for. Some guy's going to get his dream shot, right? But most of the time, even with those guys, training camp is fantasy camp, that they're never going to make it work. But really, from the beginning with Lucky Jackson, he looked good. It was like, oh, okay, like this Lucky Jackson guy. All right, maybe you got something here, right? And then last year, he was very close, I think, to making the roster. Tristan Jackson performed really well in that preseason game. You guys remember that. And Tristan just ended up, I think, ever so slightly ahead of Lucky last year. And now he goes in while Justin Jefferson is out and has performed really well. And then he goes out in the preseason game and he performs really well. And I kind of want to see it. Like, I totally get the argument. I'm not anti-trade for Adam Thielen. Don't necessarily love as far as the, contract, the injury history of Adam Thielen. He's been banged up quite a bit over the years. You get the hamstring injuries and things like that. So, like, there is concern there with Thielen, and then there is a price tag to getting Thielen. And what does Carolina want for him? Do they have other offers? All that stuff. But there's just this part of me saying, Lucky Jackson is in his prime. I think he's 27 years old. He knows this offense inside and out. Like, what's the difference really going to be? I mean, Thielen is still a good receiver. He could still catch the ball. He could still get open. He's tough. He can block, all that stuff. But I kind of want to see what the guy in his prime can show over the first, couple of games, just to see if they've got something going forward here. So, I think that they should stick with it, and they should also give some other guys a shot too, like Deshaun Jones. He was practicing with the ones the other day, so kind of caught my eye of like, oh, is that something that they're considering, is potentially rotating him in there? I don't know. It's up in the air. There's some options. They're not great options, and it's really only for the first couple games. But there is an unfortunate part for the offense with Rondale Moore going down, which is when I talked to Keenan McCardell, he said to me, the reason we wanted Rondale Moore was to try to get something that we hadn't previously had in the offense. And that was a playmaker, an underneath type, get the ball in his hands type of guy. Now that could be Ty Felton. It certainly could be Ty Felton, but Rondale Moore is lightning crazy quick. So they wanted him as an underneath type of option. You remember in that Rams game, I think a lot of us felt like, gosh, they just run everything downfield. There isn't anybody to get the ball into their hands quickly in the playoff game. And that may have influenced them to go get Rondale Moore. So if you go trade for a Thielen, that's fine. He can certainly fill in Jalen Naylor's role or Jordan Addison's, whichever it is. Or if you bring back a KJ Osborne, also, totally fine. Osborne has not really thrived outside of here, but might be able to come back, or even a Brandon Powell. But they will miss that element that maybe was only going to result in, 20 catches or something. But if it was a handful of first downs, an explosive play or two, maybe you handed to him in the backfield, something like that, then maybe it would have been an experiment that worked. I kind of thought it was going to work. And then the punt return element is important as well, because now they're really left kind of up a creek at the punt return position, and they need to find somebody who can do it, because I like Silas Bolden as much as the next person, but he's never played in the NFL before. I don't know if you want that for going to Soldier Field, your first game ever, you're returning punts. I mean, that just has Soldier Field Vikings stuff written all over it, doesn't it? Now, the other news item today, Brian Asamoah being released. And Odell Beckham. Yeah, I mean, I saw Odell Beckham's name getting thrown out there. The thing about this situation specifically is that once Jordan Addison comes back, whoever gets signed should not think that they're going to get catches. This is why you almost need an Aldrick Robinson or a Trent Sherfield much more than you need an OBJ or an Adam Thielen, because you're really talking a short period of time. Now, if one of those guys got hurt later in the season, then it's a very different story. Like, then you're going to need somebody. I don't know. Also, OBJ seems like the type of guy who wants to show up on a team halfway through the season and just hope he wins a Super Bowl. That's kind of where he's at in his career, and I don't blame him for that. Maybe like, who used to do that way back in the day? Like Andre Rison. Didn't Chris Carter come back as a Dolphin somewhat similarly to that? Deion Sanders showed up as a Raven. It kind of has that type of feel to it. Sometimes that works. But to the other piece of news of the Vikings releasing Brian Asamoah. Yes, I know what the first thing on your mind is, wow, you knew that 2022 class was tough, but holy moly, like the 2022 class is almost all gone. And it could be if the Vikings release Ty Chandler. You know, the funny thing about that is that when the Vikings staff first got here, a similar thing happened to the 2021 draft class where of course it was Darisaw, right? But then everybody else, the Amir Smith-Marsetts, the Wyatt Davises, the Kellen Monds, they were all gone by the end of training camp. And that's how I feel about kind of what Brian Flores has done here. And I don't often think about, hey, what if Ed Donatel had stuck around? Because that would have been insane. And they would not have won 14 games last year if they had stayed with that type of system and if they had tried to develop those players. It's pretty clear Lewis Cine has not latched on anywhere else. It's pretty clear that when Andrew Booth Jr. has gotten into games elsewhere, it has not gone very well. And he has not proven the Vikings wrong for getting rid of him. And I would be quite surprised if a 6 foot, 220 pound linebacker can become a difference maker somewhere else. However, it does matter to the equation that if you remember when Deion Sanders got the job at Colorado, he had a viral video where he said, yeah, I'm bringing my own luggage. You remember that? I'm bringing my own luggage. It's kind of been that way for Brian Flores, where he's really brought his own luggage. And if you were there before, even a Josh Metellus is kind of his because nobody before him was playing Metellus anywhere. And then he decided, and everything else on this defense is his, except what? Harrison Phillips? Harrison Phillips was the previous regime. Harrison Smith, obviously. Who else? Who else is the previous regime? Not too many guys. So this is Brian Flores' vision. And that vision never included Brian Asamoah. I think a major reason for that is in this type of defense, because I did think that Asamoah showed some flashes in his 2022 season. You remember that game against the New York Giants where, he was quite good and caused a fumble and, looked like he was kind of flying around. But I think that the reason that he didn't fit is because Flores is not using a huge nose tackle. He's not using a Pat Williams. He's not using a Ted Washington, huge Gilbert Brown, Sam Adams type of guy. I'll just keep naming nose tackles. A Joel Steed. He's not using those guys. He is really using kind of 3 technique type players at the DT positions, which requires the linebackers to fire downhill and run face first into a lot of traffic, a lot of guards, a lot of fullbacks, tight ends coming your way. Not as many fullbacks as there should be, but those guys coming your way. And what we saw when Asamoah got in, I think it was 2023 against Philadelphia, when he got in, was that he wasn't big enough to go toe-to-toe with guards. And even though Ivan Pace is short, Ivan Pace is built rock solid. I mean, he is pure muscle. This guy is a fire hydrant. You run into Ivan Pace, you're not going to have a fun time, even if you're a guard. And I've seen him throw his entire body at guards and slam into them and stop them in their tracks. He's also really good at knifing, like getting underneath them, getting low, being quick and getting around the corner of these guys who are pulling out or coming to the second level. I just don't think that works for Asamoah. I think he was much more of if you can stuff the line of scrimmage, which is kind of an idea in that defense, if you can really like clog the line of scrimmage with your four, then you have sideline to sideline linebackers. And that's what you saw from Asamoah when he was coming out, was his sideline to sideline speed was phenomenal. So you think about when, just for example, like Eric Kendricks is a great linebacker for the Vikings, right? Would Eric Kendricks be great in this system where the linebackers have to take on a lot of violence? I don't know, because where I thought somebody like Kendricks was so great was Linval Joseph stuffs the middle. This is why they loved Shamar Stephen. Remember how much love they had for Shamar Stephen? I think a big part was Shamar Stephen would just stop guards in their tracks. So they would just hold those guys up. And Eric Kendricks could go sideline to sideline, running backs bounce out. He's going to go chase him down. He can get into those gaps and finish the tackles. But in this system, it seems to me that the linebackers, this is a reason Cashman gets banged up sometimes. The linebackers got to go like in on the offensive linemen. Just can't really do that. Oh, Jerry Ball. Great one. Great one. And anytime you guys want to throw out a random nose tackle, please do. But I just don't think that's Brian Asamoah. He could probably make it somewhere else. And he was a good special teamer. And I got the sense that he was liked in the locker room, that he had fit in well on Matt Daniels' group. But they went out and got Kobe King, and Kobe King is just so much more of a Brian Flores type of linebacker. And once again, you're talking about going out and getting your own luggage. You're bringing your own stuff. Brian Flores would have been, I'm sure, integral at identifying Kobe King in the draft and saying, that's what I'm looking for. That's the type of player that I want. And all summer long we saw, and this is what really sort of indicated it was over, all summer long in practice, it was Kobe King ahead of Asamoah the whole time, just from the start. It was over as soon as it started. And then in the preseason game, Asamoah came out before Kobe King, and I was like, okay, I think I got it here. I think we're talking about a little bit of a showcasing situation, just hoping that they could make a potential trade there. So, nose tackle from the Chargers, Jamal Williams. Oh yeah. John Madden would gush over him. Sure. Oh, there were so many. I really loved Sam Adams though. He was one of my favorites. The return for touchdown. Keith Traylor had one where he returned one for a touchdown. That guy's not here. If that guy was here, maybe Brian Asamoah could be the guy who cleans up tackles and then coverage is good and so forth. It just wasn't him. It wasn't a fit. And so when we look back at the 2022 draft, the context matters. Hey, maybe they would have been developing Lewis Cine over a couple years if Ed Donatel was here. But the important thing about blowing the 2022 draft is when we look around and we talk about like what they've been able to do in response to those draft picks. I mean, number one, here's where now these are going to be, trust me, these are backhanded compliments. These are not like, wow, great job for you. You cut the guy when he was bad. Like, congratulations. But so take these for what they are. But the way I look at it is the draft is very random. And it's really funny because I was looking up today, just out of curiosity. I found my friend Marcus Whitman was not in on the 2022 draft for the Vikings. He gave it like a C-. And NFL.com gave it an A-. And yeah, that's the randomness element of the draft, right? So it's random. But I always think about how you respond to that and how you're able to deal with the randomness that is going to make the difference. And also being able to evaluate your own draft picks. Because one issue that teams have, and I think about this, who is the linebacker for the Steelers? Was it Devin Bush was the guy's name, where they just kept playing him even though he was struggling because he was a draft pick? The Vikings have not done that. Like, as soon as they saw that Ivan Pace was a better fit, they just played Ivan Pace. Sorry, we know you're a draft pick. Too bad. They might be doing the same thing with Ty Chandler. Like, sorry, man, Cam Akers is better than you. He's in. Or, sorry, man, Xavier Scott's better than you. He's in. And Cam Bynum, I remember you talk about old takes that did not turn out to be true. So I remember talking about how Cam Bynum, a player that I liked that draft pick, and I like Cam a ton. He's a great guy. But I remember saying, well, if Lewis Cine isn't better than Cam Bynum, I mean, like, what are we talking about here? He should be easy to beat for Lewis Cine for that starting position. So, and it turned out that Cam Bynum, a 4th-round pick cornerback from Cale, is a $15 million safety, and Lewis Cine, a first-rounder, couldn't play. Who would have known? But you think about the response, them saying, we're not going to play this guy just because he's the first-round pick. We're going to go with the better safety. And they got a lot out of Cam Bynum. I mean, when a guy gets signed for 15 mil in free agency, I mean, that says a lot about him. They got a lot out of Cam Bynum, huge part of really good defenses. They developed Josh Metellus. I don't know if Josh Metellus becomes exactly the same as he has become if Lewis Cine ends up working out. Now, the cornerback position, that one they really could have used. That's the way I think of it. The reason I didn't love the Lewis Cine pick was not actually Cine. I thought he was a good prospect. I was wrong on that. But what I didn't love about it was the positional value. A safety in the first round. But then when they drafted Andrew Booth Jr., I remember thinking, well, this is great. Like, that's a premium position. You should draft those guys high. They need a corner. They haven't drafted corners successfully high in the draft recently, and et cetera, et cetera. And it just turned out that Booth couldn't play, that he just wasn't good. Now, maybe he would have been better with Donatel, but that was another situation where they played Duke Shelley. They kept Patrick Peterson. They brought in Byron Murphy, and they didn't stick with something that wasn't going to work. And last year, even, they gave him a shot, and then they moved on from him, and they got Stephon Gilmore, and that worked really well. So the fact that they haven't stuck with these guys have also opened the door for some other players to develop and come in and become good players. That is the one that still hurts, though. I think from the 2022 draft, not Asamoah, not Cine, not any of the other guys that have sort of randomly come in and out. I really think it's Andrew Booth Jr. because that was the top corner that they needed, they haven't had, and now they're kind of hoping that Isaiah Rodgers can be that guy. So that's kind of where I stand with both of these news items. The release of Brian Asamoah, I think, says or confirms what we have seen from Kobe King. I've probably come back, 10 different practices, it feels like, and said, guys, I kind of noticed this Kobe King guy. I kind of keep coding. And I mentioned to somebody else that I know in the league, just like about this situation. Like, I just like this Kobe King guy. And, there were other teams that were pretty high on him as a third day prospect, high character. He's got, I think, a lot of power to his game and can contribute in some different ways. Maybe he becomes a run stuffer, probably a special teamer right away. They may have wanted to see that in special teams in the first game before they made this move, but Kobe King, I think, is a player on the rise. Now, they're probably hoping to not have to use him right away just because, you have Blake Cashman, you brought in Eric Wilson, but can he be the Eric Wilson eventually? I mean, I think probably. So, they miss out, and that's the whole, are you good at drafting? Well, if Kobe King becomes a good and useful player, but you had to cut another draft pick, are you good at drafting? I don't know. But they don't hand out the rings for you won the 2022 draft. They hand it out for, have you built the complete roster that could beat anybody in the playoffs and go all the way? And so their responses to these draft picks that haven't worked out has been very good, and they have crushed free agency, which has made up for these misses. So you can't give them a free pass because some of these were, what happened there? I mean, Andrew Booth Jr. on draft night told us that he had never been healthy. You're like, huh? What? You've never been healthy? And they drafted you in the second round? Okay, I guess. And, Lewis Cine, just never really seemed to be all that motivated to be great, and turned out that he wasn't. Those are big misses, and I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's reflection on that of trying to solve all the problems in one draft makes a lot of sense to me. Like everything that they needed. What do I always say? Don't draft for need. Don't, and even it might be a little risky doing that with Donovan Jackson this year, right? Don't draft for need, because if you do, you might regret it. And they tried to draft for all the needs, tried to draft a starting guard in the second round. Didn't work out. So there you have it. But at very least, they didn't hang on to these guys. They said, you're not working out and we're going to move on. So their response to it, I think, has been good, even if overall, woof. Unless Jalen Naylor ends up with, I don't know. How many catches does Jalen? That's a funny question. I'll get to the FanDuel question of the day in a second. How many catches does Jalen Naylor need to make the 2022 draft class okay? Is the answer like 78? All right. Well, he may be the last man that remains very soon. So here is the actual FanDuel question of the day, and then I'll get to your comments, and we'll have a good conversation. Then Maggie Robinson later. So FanDuel question of the day is 14 teams, 14 teams have better odds on FanDuel to make the playoffs than the Vikings. Which of these NFC teams that are ahead of the Vikings is the most dubious to you? So these are teams that have better odds to make the playoffs right now on FanDuel. Which ones are you not buying? The Packers, the Rams, the Commanders, the 49ers, or the Buccaneers? Those are teams that are in a similar tier, I think, to the Vikings, but which one of those is the most dubious? I guess I would have to say the 49ers, but I'm also wondering if the Rams could be as well, depending on Matthew Stafford's health, and also the Packers as well, because Jordan Love had some surgery today, and you're always kind of, whoa, surgery with a month to go on your throwing thumb, that's not exactly what you're looking for. Let's start out here with Son of Beavers, who says maybe a Gabe Davis type. I don't know where he's at. I mean, didn't have a good year last year. So is he somebody that can step in and provide kind of a similar role, like a deep threat type of player? It wasn't that long ago that Gabe Davis was good. It was only a couple of years ago that Gabe Davis was a pretty good wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. Not great, but a deep threat, a very similar to a Jalen Naylor type. But I think that they're looking, or they should be looking, for someone who's more of a playmaker, somebody who's more of an underneath type of quick game option that can make plays with his hands on the ball. But where do you get them? Like, usually you have to get them fairly early in free agency. And they were looking at it with Rondale Moore of like, hey, maybe we found something. Maybe we found something really cool here with Rondale Moore, and only because he was coming off an injury, which seems to be one of Kwesi Adofo. And this, look, it's a different knee. It was just bad luck, or different leg. Total bad luck play for Rondale Moore. But it is kind of interesting that this has been one of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's little cheat codes, is to get players cheaper off of injuries and roll the dice there. And sometimes it's worked and sometimes it hasn't. It worked with Van Ginkel. It did not work with Davenport, and obviously, unfortunately, it did not work with Rondale Moore. Also, I don't want to skip over one of the sponsors of our show, which is ZipRecruiter. Great to have them on board. I know a lot of you out there own your own businesses, or you're in a management position where you're hiring people, and it can be a pain. You get lots of resumes for people who aren't qualified. You don't know where to find the best candidates, but it's not that tough with ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter finds amazing candidates for you and fast, and you can try it right now for free. ZipRecruiter.com/audio. Check that out for free. You can use their smart technology that finds candidates for you quickly, or use the invite to apply button that allows you to reach out to your favorite candidates. Lots of ways you can make ZipRecruiter your best recruiting tool. Ditch the other hiring sites and let ZipRecruiter find what you're looking for. That needle in a haystack, great candidate. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter find a quality candidate in the first day. So try it for free with this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/audio. The ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. So there you go. Great to have them on board. Back to your questions. Mac says, I don't really get why we aren't okay with Jalen Naylor playing wide receiver 2 for a few games. He looked good filling in for injury last year. So I think that they are. I think that they are okay with it. And I think that they should be, because Naylor can go deep down the field, but he proved that he can also make some clutch catches as well. If you remember last year against San Francisco, he had a couple of plays that were very impressive. He had a catch that was kind of back shoulder. Remember that? They needed a dagger drive and they were looking for a back shoulder throw, and he kind of leaned back and caught it. It was a great play. Naylor has had some drop issues. There were a couple plays that he probably wanted back last year, definitely the one in Tennessee. But overall, I think Jalen Naylor is a competent number 2 for 3 games. I think over 17 games, that's probably not someone you would want as the number 2, but he knows the offense extremely well. And he is a favorite, of course, of Kevin O'Connell's, as you've probably heard a bunch of times. O'Connell has mentioned how good he's been in camp and all that sort of stuff. So I think Jalen Naylor's fine, but it's who becomes Jalen Naylor. That's what we're really talking about here. For me, Lucky Jackson is, I think, of a similar ilk, because he has great knowledge of the offense. He can catch the ball when it comes his way. And then, the biggest thing for him is just getting man-to-man coverage and beating it. Like, he can do that because you're getting man-to-man coverage as long as Justin Jefferson is out there. So it's not that any person can play the number 3 wide receiver, but it's not the hardest job in the National Football League is to be at the number 3 receiver when Jefferson is number 1. So I don't think that anyone is worried about Naylor's ability to pop in just for a little bit. I think that it's more about, okay, you have very unproven players now. Moore was the guy who was proven and who showed that he could do it. But now you don't have that anymore. There's no one who's proven on this roster. Sean says, aside from 19, none of the old Viking options get me excited. I also think Lucky has earned the spot and should get it over Powell or KJ. Yeah, things have just not really worked out for KJ Osborne outside of Minnesota. And that was a guy that going into 2023, I don't really fully understand what happened. Going into 2023, he had played really well in 2022. Remember the comeback game? He was just terrific. But then going into 23, it seemed like he put so much pressure on himself to get that big contract that he, I don't know, just maybe tensed up or something. He had more drops that year than I had ever seen from him before. And they didn't really use him in a way that was a playmaker with the ball in his hands, which is actually what I thought that KJ Osborne was going to be. When he came into the league, I thought, okay, this guy is a punt returner and a playmaker, and they made him into a more full, complete wide receiver, but there were also some shortcomings there. If Osborne ends up out there, who is he with? Washington. If he ends up on the chopping block, that is a guy that makes sense, because I think you're really looking for someone who can come in and fill in a small role for a couple of games and then just be part of your depth the rest of the way. And it's not going to be a problem. With Adam Thielen, you're making a trade for somebody to help you out for 3 games, presumably, because you really like where you're at 1, 2, and 3. And he doesn't bring anything that's really different from anybody else. Flick says, was Ingram Dawkins practicing with the ones? He's gotten a little bit with the ones. Yeah, it hasn't been a lot, but it's been enough to catch my eye. And it has seemed like he has really caught on. He's a very good communicator, I would say. I think he is a very good communicator. We talked to him the other day, and seems like a real bright kid. And he was talking about how Jonathan Allen was one of his heroes that he used to study when he was growing up, that kind of thing. I mean, he's a player who could continue to develop. I don't think that right away he's going to be someone that you're seeing a ton. As it goes on with the season, though, you might see Ingram Dawkins more and more. Max says, Adam Thielen is a storybook nostalgic target. and it would be stupid to bring him back. That being said, give him whatever he wants and bring him back. I love him. That's funny. It sounds like you're a little conflicted on that, Mac. Yeah, and I think that I am too, because if you look at Thielen the last couple of years, he's still effective. It's just health is an issue for Thielen at times. He's had hamstring injuries throughout his career and so forth. And you might be saying, well, look, you're only really needing him for a couple games. I feel like if you're going to do that option, you got to do it probably pretty soon. And I'm also not entirely sure if Carolina is willing to make that trade for Adam Thielen because he is a great locker room presence. He is great for a young quarterback. And the other thing is, and stuff changes, but they could have moved Thielen at the trade deadline last year and they decided not to. So does that mean that they want to keep him around now? Those are the things that I just don't really know. Son of a Beavers now has upped the game after last night, trying to get as deep into the woods as possible with NFL rosters. Do you think that the BA release might bring in a vet for the linebacking core like Josie Jewell or Jawan Bentley? Had some overlap with B-Flow as a rookie. I do not think that they need to bring anybody else in. I think that their linebacking group is in good shape. Clearly you spend a lot of time on overthecap.com looking at those free agents, which I respect very much. I'm just not sure that they need another vet to throw in there, because you look at the 4 linebackers that they have right now, they're in pretty good shape. I mean, with the starters, obviously they're really good. And then bringing in Eric Wilson to me was a huge thing this offseason. It might end up being one of the most underappreciated things that they do, was bringing in Eric Wilson, because if the other guys get banged up, and also he might rotate into a role or something like that, so that's a big one. And then the way Kobe King has come along, it feels like they wanted to just make sure, like halfway through training camp, just make sure that what they were seeing with Kobe King early on was what they were seeing over a big sample size. So they did see that with Kobe King. He gets into the preseason game. He looked pretty violent. He looked pretty engaged, and they decide to make this move. But I don't think that they have to go out and get somebody else. I don't think that they have to do that right now. So let's see. Max says, still can't get over how Rick Spielman fumbled Brett Jones. Guy was a far better center and guard than the guy starting, but as a Canadian UDFA, who cares? Well, here's something to think about, Mac, is the way that they have dealt with the interior offensive line. I hope that Brett Jones and that type of player is no longer haunting your dreams. Look, Brett, wow. Like what a dude. Is he coaching somewhere? He was incredibly smart. Like he was a guy in the locker room that you go over to and ask just about random football stuff. I did a story on QB sneaks before the tush push when the Patriots were dominating that play. And I talked to Brett Jones for it. And a number of other things along the way. And he was a guy that I asked somebody else. I was doing a story on which player would be most likely to be a coach after their career. And people said Brett Jones. Very, very smart guy. And similar to Dalton Reisner, where he really couldn't get out and do the athletic stuff, but he could anchor and he could stick his feet in the ground and, he could block. But again, this is why you spend $17 million in a guard. This is why you spend a first round pick in a guard. So you just don't have to be talking about why weren't they playing Brett Jones, the UDFA from Canada, right? So Wayne says, did you see the report from the Locked On Patriots podcast where not only the offense is concerned about B-Flow? Oh, we're not the only offense that's concerned about B-Flow's defense. I see. So you mean for these joint practices that their offense is concerned? Well, that's what Chad Graff told me the other day, is that they were game planning for Brian Flores' defense. Wayne says, topic of conversation was how May is going to look against a great defense. Well, look, for the Patriots writers, they've had their time in the sun over the years with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and all the championships and all that sort of stuff. But the last couple years, really going back to when they lost to Buffalo in the 2021 playoffs, they got killed. And they thought at the time that Mac Jones was going to be a good quarterback. He had that good first year. Since then, imagine being a Patriots writer. I mean, you're just covering bad and the decline of Belichick. And then, Gerard Mayo last year, tanking, a couple years in a row now. It hasn't been very pretty. So for them, this has to actually be pretty exciting that they're going to see Drake May, who's looking to take a big step forward, practice against Brian Flores' defense. It's not just us. It's not just in this Viking bubble that we come on here every night and talk about, hey, this is so unique and Brian Flores' defense, it's so different and it's so interesting and it's so challenging to opponents. And hey, if he likes Jeff Okudah, then fine, go for it, right? It's people around the NFL as well. They look at Brian Flores' defense as the most difficult to replicate, and a major part of that is the personnel. Not every team has a Van Ginkel and a Metellus and a Cashman and guys like that are shape-shifting type of players. And now Dallas Turner into that mix. And not everyone can have a Harrison Smith and a Byron Murphy, who are highly intelligent players that you can teach to do a lot of different stuff and make a lot of different changes. So, I think it'll be really fun. I know where I'm going to be looking during the joint practices, tomorrow and Thursday. I'm going to be looking at JJ McCarthy. So I might see less of Drake May. There will be, I'm sure we'll talk about it tomorrow. Like, how did Drake May look against the Vikings? I'm going to see probably the 2-minute drills mainly, and the rest of the practice, I'm going to be watching JJ McCarthy. So we'll have to see how much I can catch of Drake May, but it'll be fun to watch. I mean, I'm really intrigued. I spent so much time leading up to the draft thinking, is KOC and Kwesi going to pull this off? Are they going to trade for Drake May? So that's kind of the guy they didn't pick, but also with a supporting cast that is not so good. Red Bruno, any chance of Felton being the punt returner? Addison for Tyreek Hill would fix the wide receiver depth. I'm glad that you threw an LOL in there. I would want nothing to do with Tyreek Hill at this point in his career. Still fast, but it seems like that guy's got some problems. Lucky definitely better than Speedy for wide receiver 3. No, I don't think that Lucky Jackson is better than Jalen Naylor for wide receiver 3. I don't think that's a competition. It's just that when you're slotting up, wide receiver 4 goes to wide receiver 3. I think you feel okay with Lucky because he's been there for a couple years and he's played in these preseasons and he's played in these joint practices. It's just, you have to trust something that you've never really seen in a game. And that comes down to how good are you at evaluating your players. And so far in the KOC and Flores era, that's been a cheat code for them. And so if they roll with Lucky, you're kind of almost obligated to be like, okay, well, that must mean that they think that those guys are going to be really good. I don't think that Felton is really a punt returner. I don't know if he even did it in college. Did he even punt return in college? I know maybe a little kick returning. One of the reasons to like him as a kick returner is that, and I saw there's a guy who works for Sumer Sports, Sean Syed, who does like some cool breakdowns. And he did an analysis of the Panthers kickoff and how they're trying to bounce it in a certain area. What you need is somebody who's got hands to go chase down the football. If you got block hand kick returner, it's going to be a problem because there's going to be teams that are kicking and pinballing this thing around. It's going to be a bit of a circus, I think, with the kick return. And maybe they're going to try to install some rules or something midway about, pinballing the ball around, but I think the Vikings are going to do it. Carolina's going to do it. I think that they didn't think some things through entirely when they put this kick return in this version, which is not exactly the same as the XFL's version. William says, FanDuel question of the day, Packers better than the Vikings? I think not. Susan's got the Packers, Rams, and the Packers and the Rams is the most dubious to have better odds, and the Vikings. 49ers have an easy schedule. Frank says 49ers are not going to be good. Yeah, the schedule thing, and Nick's got the Packers or the 49ers. I would have had the 49ers as well. The schedule thing comes up a lot, and I'm a little back and forth on it. I have a tough time believing the Vikings won't have a hard schedule this year because look who they're playing. Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow. Like they're not all going to get hurt, right? So those guys are going to compete. They're going to be good, and that will make it for a difficult schedule for the Vikings. I did do some research, though, earlier this offseason where I looked up 3 different kinds of rankings for preseason strengths of schedules. I looked at it by the Vegas lines, I looked at it by the pure previous win-loss, and I looked at it by an NFL.com yearly article about who has the toughest schedule that was just done by some dudes looking at schedules. And none of them were accurate to who actually had the hardest schedules. None of them got it right exactly. And so sometimes when we say like, oh, well, this team's going to have an easy schedule, doesn't always come true. Or when a team's going to have a tough schedule, doesn't always come true. So I'm not banking on that. And I think this is the year that the 49ers kind of do hit the skids 2 years in a row. Brian says maybe this leads to another pie chart question. What's the pie chart of season total defensive snaps for the Vikings starting linebackers? Okay, I like that. I would go let's see. Well, Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace are going to play out of 100% of total snaps. So how many would that be? Like 2,500 total snaps between all linebackers for the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to say Blake Cashman plays 40% of those. And that equates to what, like 800 snaps? I think that'll be about good for him. And I would go with maybe 50% for Ivan Pace, then 90% of the snaps, and then 10% for Eric Wilson. Or 9.5%. I just don't think Kobe King's ready yet. But I do think that Eric Wilson will end up needing to make an appearance, needing to play, and be more than just a special teamer. Man Juice, nice to see you, says, should the O-line coach or Matt Daniels be on the hot seat this year, especially if they don't do better than last year? Well, Matt Daniels has a different role than just the special teams, which is a big part of it. I also think that Matt Daniels has, just by the way he talks, some ideas that he's not really allowed to use. So just for example, there's a great returner on this roster. His name is Isaiah Rodgers, but that guy's not returning kicks or punts. It's just not going to happen. That's a starting outside corner now. So they got him Brandon Powell. They got him Ty Chandler. They cut Kene Nwangwu, which was a smart move because he didn't stay healthy last year, but that was an elite returner that they sent packing. So they haven't helped him a lot there, if that's what we're evaluating it on. I think the punter has been fine. You guys like really dislike the punter. I think it's been okay. Hasn't been great. It hasn't offended me either. And Will Reichard was good last year. I think he's got high expectations for this year. But Matt Daniels is 2 roles on this team that are really valuable. One is he's in charge of the teaching the turnovers. And I know that this sounds like, what do you mean teaching the turnovers? Aren't they random? But they're not really. Like there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into taking away the ball, and this team needs to do it. And he's the coach who's in charge of it. And the other thing is development. I mean, Matt Daniels is, I think, really good at identifying talent. I think he's really good at developing players, helping players like, even a Josh Metellus, guys come along in their careers and get better and better. I think they're good at that. Like, I think they're good at that from the special teams level and then up. As far as the offensive line, yeah, there's very high expectations for this offensive line. But if you go back, okay, last year they lost Darisaw. I don't know if there's any offensive line coach in the league that was supposed to help that. If you go back and look at where they were as an offensive line with Darisaw, they were in the top 5 last year by PFF. But you lose your superstar left tackle. I mean, you're just not going to hold up. And then, things devolved from there over the years, or over the weeks of the year until they got to the playoffs, and then they faced the nastiest D-line in the league. That D-line for the Rams was so good, they got after Jalen Hurts in the playoff game against the Eagles. I mean, they were really that good. So, I think that the offensive line has been a lot better recently, over the recent years. It's just that, when you're talking about losing Darisaw, that really hurt them. But yeah, there is high expectations for this team. I also don't think that they are really a team that likes to fire and hire coaches all the time. It seems to me like they don't ride the roller coaster of, well, hey, your running backs didn't perform that well last year, so you're fired. They've kept Curtis Modkins. Now, I wondered about that myself. I mean, now we're like way deep in the weeds. I wondered about that myself with Curtis Modkins. Like, shouldn't you bring in? But they brought in another offensive line coach whose background is in running the football, and so maybe they're doing it that way. They moved their quarterback coach from a couple of years ago to then fit in Josh McCown, and they have a very large coaching staff, that's for sure. But they're not a team that, hey, if this didn't work out or that didn't work out, you're fired. I think they like the process, and the players have always spoken very highly of Chris Cooper. And I don't just mean to me like on the record with a mic in their face. They really like the way that he communicates, and he's been through it himself. But look, if you have this line and they stay healthy and they don't perform, then yeah, then you are talking about something like that. S. Dot other words there. Sorry, that's just too many letters. Could have sworn Ty Felton was the pick KOC was happy about. What happened to that kid? Well, I mean, we're only at August 12th of training camp, man. What happened? Like let's not be talking about Ty Felton as if he's, one of those 2022 draft picks that we'll never hear from again. I think that with Ty Felton that he's on his way. He had a pretty good preseason game, and he's going to be somebody that's returning for them. And I mean, you saw the punt gunning rep. That was pretty impressive. You saw a couple of catches. He had a third down catch for a first down that was pretty good. I just think he's a guy who's coming along. I don't think what you want to try to do is force him in too much. I think it's more of you're trying to work him in and get him developed more and more as you go along. The Meticular says free agency or not, Kwesi whiffing on draft picks isn't sustainable. I've lost all faith in his drafting abilities. Well, think about it this way when it comes to the draft. I mean, we've been through this so many times. I don't need to give the rant. Like, just does Jordan Addison count or not? Like, it seems like a pretty good pick, but I guess the people who obsess over the 2022 draft like to give that credit to somebody else. And also, how many drafts are we on? And how many draft picks has it actually been? How many draft picks would you need to know that someone actually wasn't good at drafting? 2022 has clearly gone sideways, and we've gone over the explanations for that many, many times. But when you're talking about, well, free agency or not, whoa, hold on. They have one of the 5 best rosters in the NFL that just won 14 games and then got better. What is the goal here? For some of you, the goal seems to be to draft well, and however good the actual roster is, well, whatever, forget that. But the drafting, last time I checked, the goal of a general manager is to build the best possible roster to give you the best chance to win. And so if you miss on some draft picks, but you find guys as a 6th rounder that they developed with this coaching staff of Metellus, an undrafted starter with Ivan Pace, if these guys were draft picks, you guys wouldn't have anything to say, would you? Like, Cam Bynum, okay, he wasn't their draft pick, but they picked him to play that position and they developed him into a really good player. Or how about, finding guys like Cashman or Grenard who are in their primes and on the upswing, or even, if it works out for Isaiah Rodgers, things like that. Like there's been a lot of these players that they've been able to find that were either in-house or that they have brought in. Gabe Murphy the other day, but it's an undrafted free agent, so you don't get any credit. I mean, I don't know. Where do we draw the line with all this? That's why I don't obsess over this guy was drafted in this round or whatever. Hey, look, for example, if Ben Urasek turns out to be a good number 3 tight end and not Gavin Bartholomew, I'm not going to bring a fire Kwesi sign to TCO Performance Center. It's like, well, you got to find him somehow. And what they've done with the free agency, you can't say free agency or not with this team, not with a team that's brought in superstars through free agency and has become the premier place for free agents to sign and stay, like Byron Murphy Jr. Again, does Byron Murphy Jr. not count? Does that not count? That's a player who was pretty mid when they got him. Andrew Van Ginkel, pretty much unknown when they got him. Grenard had one season when they got him. Cashman had one season when they got him. None of that matters, guys, because the Andrew Booth Jr. pick and the Brian Asamoah pick didn't work out. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. You have to build a winning team somehow, and the Vikings cheat code has been in free agency. It's also been, well, they have TJ Hawkinson was a second-round pick that they had to trade for him. Is that okay or not? Like, I don't know. And we'll see what happens with Dallas Turner. We'll see what happens with Donovan Jackson. These are guys who will also decide how much you get to come into comment sections and yell at everyone about the 2022 draft, I guess. Herm says, any Elijah Williams reps? Got to tell you, Herm, Elijah Williams, one of the big winners of the first preseason game, I would say. He was an absolute beast. He went out there and got 4 quarterback pressures, made a difference on a number of plays, and he has a burst to him. He's got a power to him. He's got a drive. And just from what I've heard, sounds like a really bright kid. So, you know, when a guy comes in from one of those all-star games, like the HBCU all-star game, there's been other ones. Levi Drake Rodriguez played in something I haven't heard of. The Senior Bowl is another one. The Shrine Bowl is another one. Those are often telling. You know, Josh Metellus was really good in his Senior Bowl, and the Vikings have drafted out of that, you know, more than once. So, you know, when it comes to, when it comes to Elijah Williams, I think he's a guy that is absolutely going to be on the practice squad and has a chance to develop into something into next year. 53 would be hard just because it's really packed, but I think when it comes to his outlook, he's made a really, really good first impression. See, this is where I'm just not going to keep going into this because I don't need to do this every day. But, you know, Marley's saying that drafting is the most important aspect of a GM's job. I just can't understand the obsession. I can't understand the obsession. It's the best indicator of long-term sustainable success. First of all, long-term sustainable success is a myth in the NFL. It's an absolute myth. The only way you have long-term sustainable success is if you have Josh Allen, or you have Lamar Jackson, or Patrick Mahomes. Those are the only ways that you have long-term sustainable success. Here's what the best GMs in the NFL do. They build up rosters that have peaks to them and have windows that are open to try to win. And what the Vikings have done with their current general manager is they have opened up a window around JJ McCarthy by handling the salary cap brilliantly, by hiring a coach in Kevin O'Connell who could create an environment that players want to come play, by having an ownership that's willing to spend the money on free agents to bring them there, and by building a team that people know with the coaching staff, with the assistants, with the defensive coordinator, with the offensive play caller, that people know you're going to get the best out of me. Every free agent that I talked to who came here said, well, the NFLPA survey was a big deal, and that I know this coaching staff is going to get the most out of me. And also, like, wink, wink, nod, nod, they paid me. Like, they don't say that part, but they did. That's why they're able to do that. And also, they're able to find under the radar players. I mean, you can't look at an Ivan Pace Jr. and the contribution over the last couple of years and be like, oh, that doesn't matter. It absolutely does matter to be able to find an undrafted free agent like that. And now you see Gabe Murphy, you see Zamiah Vaughn, you see even Max Brosmer. Like, they've been really good at that. That apparently doesn't count. The only thing that counts is a 3rd-round draft pick who was 220 pounds and didn't work out. I mean, I just don't get it. It's not the sign of a general manager. Understanding because it's random, because you can go through any GM's drafts over the years. Like, do the work. Go look at anybody's drafts. Go look at San Francisco. We were anointing them as being so brilliant, right? A couple of years ago. Go look at their drafts. Go look at Philly's drafts. You want to crown them? Go look at a couple of years ago when they were drafting Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. But they're geniuses, right? Why are they geniuses? Because Philadelphia understood the windows to win and when to invest big. And then they hit on a few big draft picks after that. They understood the positions. the money of where to spend a first round draft pick on A.J. Brown, and how to stack a roster when your quarterback was still cheap. That's what the Vikings have done. That's, to me, understanding where you are as a franchise and acting accordingly is the true best sign of a general manager, not whether you hit on your third round draft pick from 2022. I think there's a lot more evidence of that, of sensing the moment when your team has a legitimate chance to win and making the moves. Even you want to give San Francisco credit, give them credit for like a Christian McCaffrey trade. I didn't think that was a great trade. And then they went out and did it because that was their time to win. That was when their roster was peaking. So, they don't, when you walk up there to accept the Lombardi trophy, they don't go, did you do it through the draft? Because if you didn't, move on. Oh, you had free agents who were 30? Oh my gosh. Do you guys know that veteran teams win the Super Bowl, by the way? Anyway, I knew this would go into silly season. You guys wanted me to go there, so I went there. They've got better linebackers. They found one of them in free agency. Fire Kwesi. Oh man. What a day for you people who just really, as the team looks great out there from top to bottom, and everybody's talking about like, yeah, this Vikings roster is so good, and you're just hanging on to like, maybe I get one more shot in before the season starts and they're a good team. I don't know. After a 14-win season. Anyway, Jorgen Swest? Jorgen. I know that Joe Huber took college snaps across the line, including center, with Zeke Correll out. Is Huber going to see any time at center? He did one day and it didn't work out very well. They might have to get somebody else. Or they signed someone, Michael Gonzalez. I hadn't heard of him, but we're talking about the third center here. Joe Huber is a guard, though. I think he's very much a guard. Rage the Beast Within says, that sounds like me every time someone brings up this draft class. I wonder if the Vikings will have Max Brosmer become the third stringer. I think they will. I definitely think they will. Yep. The way that he's performed, he looks to me like somebody who should be a number 3 quarterback in the NFL right away and has potential in the future to be a backup. I don't think there's anything more to find out about Brett Rippon. If someone picks him up, they pick him up. Nick says Kwesi admits they failed and says he learned from it. Yep. I mean, it happens a lot. It happens a lot all around the league. You can look at any team. You'll find a draft that didn't work. That one didn't work. Tom says, how do you feel about the depth of the O-line if someone misses time this year? And not particularly good, but especially a tackle. That's where, Walter Rouse, I think, has been coming along. The fact that he played left and right tackle in training camp, and then a lot of left. I think he played a little right too, also in the preseason game, tells me that they like where he's at. Oh, right tackle when Justin School is there. So if Darisaw is in practice, Rouse moves over to right tackle. School, I have not felt great about, but I never felt great about David Quessenberry either. Or, probably Rashad Hill was the best swing tackle they've had in a while. And, you only wanted a game or two out of him. The guard position, though, you should be fine. Blake Brandel. And then the center spot, Michael Juergens was good in the run. Did not grade particularly well as a pass protector. I don't think look, if you're a center that is a really good pass protector, you are starting. You're not a backup like Michael Juergens. So he's coming along a little bit. I don't feel great about that, but I don't feel great about any backup center, I don't think, in the entire league. The issue that I was concerned about the most is some of the snaps. You shouldn't be fumbling snaps, no matter who it is as a quarterback, no matter what's going on. Like, it just shouldn't happen. And it's happened in practice, and it's also happened in the games. That would be the biggest concern for me about Juergens. I think he can get in there and play if they need him to, but can he be as good as Ryan Kelly? No, of course not. Susan, is there any news about Gavin Bartholomew? We have not heard any. I think he was on the PUP list, and it just seems like there is not going to be much of a 2025 for Gavin Bartholomew. If you're competing for tight end 3 and you're not out there by the middle of camp, it's pretty hard to see you jumping in. It's Urasek or it's going to be somebody else that they pick up. TLS, thank you so much for the super chat. Making sense. I try. I try. We try to work through these things logically, the best that we can, and keep everything in perspective, the best that we can. That's the job here. Let's see. John says, "Are you concerned that at all that teams seem to be more scared of our defense rather than our offense?" That seems like a reach, John. That seems like a reach. I think teams are plenty scared of Justin Jefferson, and I think it's probably a good thing if they're concerned about your defense. Right now, it reads to me, and I'm going to have an interview with Mike Sando, who did the quarterback tiers. But if you read the quarterback tier article from The Athletic, what it reads like to me is that nobody knows nothing when it comes to JJ McCarthy, that all the other coaches and the people that he interviewed for that story were like, I don't know, are they in love with him, or is he injury prone, or what, like stuff that just sounds like they don't know anything about him at all. And for us that have watched him day after day of practice, we've seen a lot of good things, and we've seen some inconsistency that makes you wonder about what the ceiling is for the offense. But also, we've seen Justin Jefferson, and this running game has been really impressive. So you might end up having like that like when you put something on the one side, what is it called? Like the weight thing, like a little weight on the left evens it out. So look, if he's probably not going to right off the bat throw 35 touchdowns for 4,000 yards and play as well as Sam Darnold. Like, just probably not, right? But at the same time, if you get a much better running game, your defense continues to be as good as it's been, and you could still move the ball and throw the ball effectively with McCarthy under center and hit on some big plays, you can even that out. You can even out some, because last year, as good as the offense was, I think we all know last year there were inconsistencies, that it was, hey, they just hit a couple of big plays to get ahead in a game, and they got a turnover to get ahead in a game, but they really didn't hold on to the ball. I mean, there was a stretch there where opposing teams really dominated them when it came to their possession. So Frank says, what's your opinion if JJ, talking to somebody else, but what's your opinion if McCarthy and Dallas Turner work out? Well, look, I mean, it's going to be a thing that some people can't let go, kind of like everything else. That's, we were talking about that with national TV hosts who will still say LeBron's not good. Like, some people get fixated on certain things, especially because the draft to some is, I think, a lot more fun than the actual football season. So we can go through all these things and all these, the strength of the roster, the winning window that they've created, the long-term contracts that they've been able to sign that now look very reasonable for their superstar players, the quarterback they've drafted, all the different stuff that this team has done to become a truly competitive team and have a chance in this next 2 to 3 years to really chase a championship, which is the goal of the general manager. We can go through all that. But when some folks who really fall in love with that draft and then it doesn't work out, and maybe they didn't like the draft picks from the start of it, I think they hold on to that a lot tighter than they need to, because their goal here is really to try to compete for a championship and win games, not to, get the highest draft grade or whatever. Let's see. 72 MRJ says, after 53-man roster cuts, is there a position you'd like to see the Vikings adding? I'm guessing maybe cornerback, tight end, maybe running back. I like where Xavier Scott is for the running back position. Tight end is definitely one. Right now, I just haven't seen anything from tight end that I like. Urasek, I think, is a practice squad guy that could develop into like a Johnny Munt type, but I don't know if you're ready to have him actually play much. And corner, I think they're okay there because you'd have Zemiah Vaughn. Dwight McGlothern's now going to have another year of development as your depth guy. Rodgers, Okuda. Are you picking up a corner that's really helping you at that point? Probably not. Like the Tremaine Brock. There's a different guy for every example, right? Like they need to pick up a corner like Tremaine Brock, who really didn't help them at all in 2017. Derek says, more interested to see how our run defense holds up against, I assume you mean the Patriots. Good preview for a matchup against Gibbs. Yeah, I mean, that's a hard thing to figure out. I don't know if you're talking about in joint practices or who you're talking about there, but If it's in joint practices, then a little hard to tell sometimes, just when it comes to like how well the running game is working in a joint practice. Passing game is obviously much easier to see, but you're right. You know, when you're talking about how they handle going up against somebody else, if it looks like they're getting run over, then that's not great. Um, if it looks like they're holding up, okay. But Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, they've been there. The guys that I'm really interested in are really Levi Drake Rodriguez and Jalen Redmond. If they get rotated in, I think that will tell us something. Tomorrow's an exciting day, folks. It is an exciting day. William says Naylor was a punt returner at MSU. Watched him every Saturday. Yeah, you know, he went in and he had kind of one go over his head. And that was probably the end of that. Punt returning is so much different in the NFL. It's just so much different in the NFL. The punters are so much better. The guys covering are so much faster. And also, I don't want Jalen Naylor hearing or having any possibility of an injury. I don't think I would not like to see him back there and then get banged up. And then you're talking about, like, I like where Lucky Jackson is at. I kind of like where Ja'Shawn Jones is. I kind of think Felton's coming along, but you don't want to lose Jalen Naylor. For the FanDuel question of the day, David says, if Stafford doesn't become immortal, then the Rams will miss the playoffs. I did see that there was a van. He goes into a van to get treatment. I think he's just taking naps. That's my guess. Turn on a little golf, get a nice couch in there, doze off for a few hours. It's great recovery. It's great recovery. Will says, how did Darisaw look in his first camp versus Donovan Jackson? Darisaw didn't. He did not have a first camp. He actually did not come back, I think, until maybe week 5 or 6 of 2021. I'd have to look it up. Maybe week 4, somewhere in that ballpark, because he had an injury and it kept him out for the entire training camp. And then he had to ramp up, and when his first game was against Brian Burns in Carolina, and he did really well. Donovan Jackson, I think, you know, we've got the question about how does he look in comparison to Ed Ingram? And I want to take my time with this because it is so difficult to come in and play after playing a college football season where you go win the national championship, and then you got to learn everything there is to know on the offensive line against guys who are better than you, who are stronger than you, who are beasts, who are proven over 10 years in the NFL. It's so hard. So I don't want to judge where Donovan Jackson's at. I think that there's been some really obvious wins against him, and there has been, you know, sometimes where he's looked like he's going to have to really, really fight in order to get to the point where he is an above average lineman. But I've also seen him have a lot of impact in the run game. And if he's better in the run game and he's just fighting for it in the pass game and can survive and they can give him a little help, it'll be okay. And then it'll come along. But trying to project, it's hard. To me, he hasn't looked like he's there yet. And that's what the next month has got to be. And how much does he grow at that point? Son of Beavers, free my boy Oscar. I assume you mean Chapman. You're just like KOC doesn't know Oscar Chapman's name the other day. So, you know, when it comes to Oscar Chapman, I really like that ball. Looked weird, man. That ball, it was like spinning around crazy. And the punt returner for the Texans, I don't think knew what to do with it. So it was a really good looking punt, but I don't think that you want a new holder. And I know some people are like, what are you talking about holding? But if there's chemistry there over 2 years with Will Reichard and Ryan Wright, just let it be. And if Wright really struggles, then maybe you consider making a change. But I still think that he's okay. Sean says 49ers have an easy schedule, yet lost key personnel, a lot of injuries to start the season. Ayuk out till week 6, and Juszczyk just got injured. Oh, Juszczyk is injured as well? I didn't know that. A few other wide receivers, but they're always the 49ers. I don't know, like, do they practice with like medieval, you know, weapons or something? Like, what is it that the 49ers do that they're always banged up? I think that they have a lot of violent players. And I remember when they came in 2022 for the joint practice, some of the Vikings guys were like, hey, hold on a little bit here. Like we're talking about a joint practice, guys. Like you're really going over the top. So, maybe that's why they're always banged up. But I agree with all of your assessment, though. In terms of that, the 49ers being injured, older, they don't have great depth. They're asking a lot of Brock Purdy. I just think that they're a mid type of team. And like you said, easy schedule or not, that easy schedule could change very quick. You get two teams that you didn't expect to be good, and then other teams have health. Like a lot of times it depends on when you play a team, just how good they're going to be. Nick says FanDuel has 14 teams higher Super Bowl odds than the Vikings. Who's the most dubious? Tampa Bay. In terms of Super Bowl, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Green Bay, and the Rams. Yeah. So in terms of, those, same teams that I was looking at for dubious for just making the playoffs. But in terms of like who would be a dubious Super Bowl pick, does Tampa Bay seem like a team that can really win the Super Bowl? I'm not sure about that. The Commanders, you have Jaden Daniels. You got yourself a shot. Their general manager, trust me, is going to be considered a genius for many years to come if Jaden Daniels is what he was last year, because they will have a very long winning window because their quarterback is incredible and he's going to make them good every year. The Rams are a good enough team. Really depends on Stafford. I don't see Green Bay as being that team, and I don't see San Francisco as being that team. Comet says, your colleagues Gessling and Kramer said months ago that the coaches told them that they drafted Felton to return kicks. Okay, well, good reporting by my friends. He was back there returning kicks the other day, so I assume that that's what they want him to do. It was punts, though. Someone asked about punts, and I don't think he has returned punts. Kicks, though, clearly he looks like a guy with the explosiveness, the ball handling ability, that he could be a difference maker potentially in the kick return. And the fact that he's not somebody who's a main wide receiver would also be kind of attractive too. Let's see. Derek says, not to mention the cap management has been worlds better under Kwesi. Well, look, you're a cap genius if you can move on from Kirk. They've made the biggest things happen since they got here, this leadership. And the biggest one was getting to the rookie quarterback contract, becoming a destination place for free agents to want to sign. Like, these are the biggest things. And creating, like, matching up. This is a hard thing to do. And look at the Patriots. This is a hard thing to do. Matching up when your roster is ascending and is ready to win with a young quarterback together is something that the 49ers did. It's something that the Eagles did. It's something I would say the Texans did pretty well over the last 2 years, making the playoffs. So, I think that that's the best thing that they've done. They got here with a plan, and then they executed the plan really, really well to build this roster. That is the much more important thing than one particular draft, because name me a team that doesn't have a signing not work out. Or, look at the Raiders. They signed Christian Wilkins thinking they got the best player in free agency. It didn't work out. Like, sometimes stuff just happens. Guys get hurt. Guys don't fit in a system. Guys don't want to play football. I don't know. Stuff happens. But in the bigger picture, did you time out when your salary cap was going to give you the option of signing players with, you were going to have the younger quarterback that you're drafting and is ascending? Did you time those things out with superstars in their prime? Everyone loves to have a bunch of young players. Hey, the Packers, youngest team in the league last year. Worked out great. They got destroyed in the playoffs by a team with a lot of veterans and some young players as well. But really it's about guys in their prime that win, right? Blake Cashman is in his prime. Jonathan Grenard's in his prime. It would be wonderful if they were 20, I guess, but like, if they're in their prime, then you have multiple years of chances to win with those guys as key players. So, Kyle says, during training camp, have you found that a guy that screams potential diamond in the rough? Well, There's a few. I mean, Lucky Jackson is obviously one of them who stepped up. Xavier Scott has gotten a lot of mentions on the show. I still think Zamaya Vaughn has shown a lot of potential. Those are probably the biggest ones. But the diamond in the rough. So we were talking about Elijah Williams earlier. I'll throw his name out there as a diamond in the rough because that's very in the rough. Morgan State. But probably Joe Huber is the one that's really stuck out to me the way that he played the other day. That's where I thought you know that they found somebody like, whoa, he might be pretty good. But Elijah, you want to talk about a diamond in the rough? Elijah Williams standing out the way he did, that would be one that's like the deepest cut, I think. Let's see. We got a lot of arguing going on tonight with you guys. I figure, 2022 draft comes up, we get a lot of arguing. So, I mean, it is actually pretty funny though, because no matter what you say about like where this team is at right now, one of the best situations in the entire NFL for the next 2 to 3 years, right? We would agree with that. And still it'd be like, but you got to have the young things. And like, well, they kind of do, right? Addison is young. I'd say Jordan Mason is in the early part of his career. Christian Darrisaw is in his prime, young. Justin Jefferson is certainly far from old. Blake Cashman in his prime, Grenard in his prime. I mean, Murphy's in his prime. You've got like Theo Jackson. There's a young oh my gosh, they didn't draft Theo Jackson. He doesn't count. If Theo Jackson leads the league in interceptions because the Vikings picked him up off of a practice squad from another team, identifying him as a really good fit, but he was drafted by somebody else, so he doesn't count as a young ascending player. Neither is Ivan Pace or Gabriel Murphy. Like, come on, like these games that we play are kind of silly. They've got a ton of players that are not old. They've got a handful that are Aaron Jones and Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, Harrison Smith. Those guys are on the older side. They'll have to replace them eventually. And they'll draft some more players and we'll see what happens. But are we done with all the drafting though, by the way? They've had 3. They've had 3 drafts. I don't think that the book is written on JJ McCarthy or Dallas Turner or, a number of other players. So, they've created themselves a very nice window to try to win. And that's the goal. Sean mentions that, Pace is playing at the level of an expected second round pick or third. Yeah, probably a third round pick. I always think of things as from a much, much farther back view because everyone's going to get fooled sometimes. I mean, Marcus Davenport was a good bet. We liked the Marcus Davenport bet. It happened. It's like going out and grabbing a guy who had down production, but a good amount of pressures and had some injuries. Like that was a fine move for where they were. Just didn't work out. And so that's going to happen on a micro level all the time. A third round pick linebacker who weighs 225 pounds doesn't work out. It happens. So you have to find somebody else. You have to do a good job in other areas, which I think they've done. It's really hard to argue when a team's coming off a 14-win season and got better overall that like they're doing it wrong. That's kind of the main message. Susan says to me, UDFAs who succeed are more valuable than first or second round picks because they will be willing to settle for more reasonable long-term contracts. Susan, you're not crazy when it comes to that. I mean, that is kind of true that guys who are drafted later, they do get more favorable contracts. Now, I mean, even like Adam Thielen was an RFA and his first contract after that 2016 season was very reasonable. And they eventually, got that up to the right spot with him, but it kind of took a while. So yeah, I wasn't really thinking of it from that perspective. I just think that if you can be the team that takes advantage of the undrafted free agent market and finds 5 or 6 of these guys that are contributors, like, wow, more power to you, because very few teams are able to do that. They've done it. So they've done a lot of things right so far. So TLS, Detroit is starting Christian Mahogany at left guard. I had hoped Minnesota would draft him. It would have been better in place of Will Reichard. Look, I mean, I was never the biggest fan of drafting a kicker. That's never going to be a thing that I'm super in favor of. I will say that Will Reichert is a pretty darn good kicker, very talented. We'll see how he does this year. I get you. Sixth round picks, though, it's hard for me to fight about those. It's hard for me to fight about, well, they picked this guy in the sixth, but I liked that guy. Like, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, but isn't Mahogany also one of the biggest questions about the Detroit Lions team? I actually thought that that's where you were headed with that. Like, hey, there's this sixth rounder they're going to start, and they have higher odds with our FanDuel question of the day. If you missed it earlier, the FanDuel question of the day was that 14 teams have better odds to make the playoffs on FanDuel than the Vikings. Who's the most dubious of those teams? 49ers, Packers, Rams, Commanders, or Bucks? So I didn't include the Lions, but if you wanted to throw the Lions in there, that's what I thought where you were headed with that. It would be because they're starting guys who are sixth round draft picks or recent draft picks, as opposed to some of the beasts they've had the last few years. Name says, do you think that Brosmer is a potential to compete for QB2 this year, or is he more a year off? The way I've got him right now, just trying to look into the future, using the crystal ball a little bit, I can foresee Max Brosmer being QB2 next year. Going into next year with maybe a veteran. Okay, I'm going to try to reach deep. Who was it? Didn't they had like Bubby Brister compete with somebody in a training camp one year and he didn't win the job? I feel like I'm trying to go back to a year. You guys can correct me on what year it was. That would be what I think we're looking at next year is they bring in a veteran to compete with Brosmer, and he's got a good chance to win the job. I really like the outlook for Max Brosmer, though. Really like the outlook. Rob says KOC got 4,700 yards, 30 touchdowns out of Cousins, Dobbs, Mullins, the composite of those, and then 14 wins from Darnold. Zero concerns what he could do with JJ or even Howell. Yeah, Howell, I have more concerns, but because it's not like they really won a lot with Dobbs or Mullins in there. They did get some big yards from Mullins. But when it comes to what we've seen previously, it does matter. It absolutely matters to the past, to what we think is going to happen in the future with JJ McCarthy. So everybody asks me on every radio hit or every podcast that I go on, the first question is, of course, like, can they do it with JJ McCarthy? Can they be successful? And the first thing I go to is like Sam Darnold just last year. Now, Sam was more experienced and was a great thrower, but I think what you really saw there is KOC understand what he did well. And if he has their communication with him and McCarthy is fantastic. Every single day, he's standing right behind that huddle and he throws a pass and McCarthy will come back and they'll look at it on the video board and they'll go over it. If he gives him a regular high five, it was pretty good. If he gives him a low five, it was great. And if he stops him to go over something, maybe he wanted a different read. The communication's really good. And it's just been harder to judge in camp when you don't have Justin Jefferson. I don't know if he's coming back over these next couple days for joint practices. I suspect no. So if he comes back in the time that the practices are still open to us, which is 3 more days next week, then I really want to see that chemistry because that might look totally different. The reason that I thought last year in camp, you can go back to these very same camp shows. The reason I thought last year in camp that it was going to work for the Vikings, honestly, was because of Jefferson. Because Darnold was throwing it up to him and he was making the plays. That was why I thought it was going to work. And so not having Jefferson has probably shaded our view of McCarthy a little bit more toward, I don't know. I'm having trouble projecting it, but we've still got, time left to evaluate, especially the next 2 days, which will be great shows, I think, to recap everything that we see from McCarthy. Susan, could Xavier Scott be a punt returner? I don't think so. He hasn't done it at all from what I've seen, so I don't think so. I think Xavier Scott is probably something else, special teams, but I don't think he's a punt return. Maybe he gets a shot at kick returning. I don't know. Rob says, I watched the all 22 of Donovan and he was okay after being beaten by that linebacker blitz first, something to work on. With Donovan Jackson, I just, Phil says he's got to adjust to the speed of the NFL. I feel the same way when it comes to Donovan Jackson, that we've got to just give him time. We've got to just give him time to see where he's able to grow in the next month and over the first 3 or 4 weeks. I really think that we're going to have to give that time. We are going to have to give that time. So, all right. Well, this was an entertaining conversation, but it's not completely over because Maggie Robinson, intern Maggie, put together some rookie quarterback performances around the NFL and also some headlines and storylines to discuss. So I want to bring you that conversation before we wrap up here today. But let me say this newsletter, great time to go over to purpleinsider.football, sign up for the newsletter. Purpleinsider.com also counts. You can go there, sign up for the newsletter. Going to have a lot of information coming from the recap of Vikings and Patriots on the written side. We'll be live 7:30 Central Time tomorrow and on Thursday night. Also, we'll have a conversation Friday with Dane Mizutani reacting. And then Dane and I are going to do the post game. I mean, there's a lot coming up here, guys. A lot coming up. It will be very, very exciting over these next few days for the Vikings. So make sure that you're subscribed and tell your friends and all that sort of stuff. And we will have a good old time. So here is my discussion with intern Maggie about some of the rookie quarterback performances around the league and some other headlines as well. Thanks again for watching, everybody. All right, we welcome back into the show intern Maggie Robinson, formerly a producer for the National Football League, now getting the master's degree from Syracuse, and has been assigned to the show to look around the National Football League at other headlines because I have been buried in fourth stringers and who's making the 53 and preseason previews and joint practices and all those things. So it has been your assignment, Maggie, to keep an eye on the rest of the National Football League. So how are we doing, and where would you like to begin the discussion?
I'm doing pretty good. It's awesome to have football back and to have things to talk about. So I want to kick it off with our rookie QBs. Some of them made some waves this past weekend with honestly some impressive standout performances. I don't want to overhype people. I'm not trying to play into that machine. However, some people had things to write home about. So I want to get into them with you. Okay.
Okay, who do you want to start with? Do you want to start with Shedeur Sanders? Because I have not said, I don't think, a word about Shedeur Sanders' preseason game, which maybe might get me banned from the Pro Football Writers Association of America, because it seems like this one preseason game is doing a lot of heavy lifting for Shedeur Sanders' career. He went up to a reporter after and said, "You're going to say something nice about me now." He wasn't being a jerk. He was kind of joking, but I was like, it was just one preseason game, my dude. I think we might be overreacting a little bit to him, but I don't know. Do you think that we should have hot takes on Shedeur Sanders' one preseason game?
I don't know. Mel Kiper's pumping his fist right now. I know that for sure, but I think he had a solid showing. I will call it that. I will call it above average, but I don't think the bar was incredibly high for Shedeur Sanders for him to have a solid performance. I think people saw that he had 14 of 23, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. Great. That's good. That's kind of to be expected, though, is it not? Let's not blow this into something that it's not. I think a lot of critics were saying he needs to get used to the speed of an NFL game and make decisions faster. And he even said so himself. I think he gave himself like a C+ rating of, I need to speed up my processing when I have pressure coming at me. Valid. Good. He's self-aware. That's helpful. And I think he's naming what we're all seeing. So I was pleasantly surprised with this. I didn't want to see him crash and burn, but also keep in mind, he's in a stacked quarterback room with Joe Flacco, who is guaranteed to be QB1, and Dylan Gabriel isn't going to just sit there idly and let this happen. So take this all with a grain of salt.
I love how polite you were with stacked. It's got bodies. There are people
in mass,
crowded. Quarterback room. Well, with Sanders specifically, I think the NFL told you on draft day what they thought of Shedeur Sanders as a prospect, that he is a day 3 type of prospect. And to me, that doesn't mean you can never start in the NFL. Kirk Cousins did. Dak Prescott did. Hey, did you know Tom Brady was a 6th round draft pick? Because Mel certainly let us know that after Shedeur was picked and through the rest of all 3 days. But as far as fifth round picks, they need to really prove it to me. And 130 something yards in a preseason game is fine. And he didn't
Yeah.
fall on his face, and that's great. But Tanner McKee went like 20 for 25 with 250 and 2 touchdowns. I mean, guys around the league who will never play or are project backup quarterbacks have played well, as you know, we're going to talk about a little more. So I don't think that it's anything to really react to at all. It's just that Shedeur Sanders' name comes along with attention. It's almost like when LeBron James's kid played in a couple of games for the Lakers. He played like 5 minutes and then went back to the bench. And we got full breakdowns. We got full opinions. We got TV segments. And you're like, he's just a bench guy who's kind of in the G League. Like, what are we talking about here? And I kind of feel the same way. Like, Sanders has not been at the top of that competition, and he played okay, but he didn't light anybody on fire. And off we go for the rest of his career. If he makes it, he makes it. But I think that even in this early part of camp, there's been clear signs of, yeah, he was not this superstar prospect that he was made out to be because of the PR machine that was Colorado.
And I think it's also a little shocking. Shiloh Sanders is sliding under the radar. Same last name, same dad, but I don't know if I mean, I do know. He's more humble. He's quieter about it. He's not in your face and as flashy, but I think they're both going to be solidly average guys. They're going to get time when someone gets hurt or someone needs a break, but they're never going to be your stars. They're not.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I think that Shedeur could have a long career in the NFL. And if he's going to be anything more than a backup, he's going to really have to prove it. And I think that he did okay in taking a step toward that. And we'll see where it goes from there. Who else did you want to talk about?
Someone who I think actually could be a star. And again, we're talking here about an actually stacked quarterback room in the New York Giants. We got Russell Wilson, QB1, gonna happen. Jameis Winston. This is the quarterback room of fives. Jameis Winston, Tommy DeVito, Jackson Dart. But he did pretty great. He had 12 of 19 passing, 154 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. He looked good on all these lists. Like, he's coming up top of the list for everybody rating his performance. So I think he's making a name for himself, and it's probably not going to come to fruition this season. Again, he's got some good people in front of him, but I think other teams also are taking note and back pocketing this and being like, okay, this kid, someone keep my eye out for.
Yeah, the Giants are actually quietly sort of interesting because they've really stacked up their defense, and they have Malik Neighbors, who is already one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And you could sort of see it working enough to keep Jackson Dart on the sidelines and Russell Wilson starting. I think if Jameis Winston is playing, like, something really bad has happened, because it should be Wilson until it's not. And that division is such a nightmare that they probably won't be in the playoffs. But even if they're competing for it toward the end of the season, then it's going to be Wilson down the stretch. But I am intrigued by Jackson Dart. It seemed like in the middle of last season, there wasn't any real discussion about him. And then the momentum started to pick up during draft season. And the throw that he made down the sideline for a touchdown was a legit dime that dropped in there perfectly. And I think that that's kind of his specialty, is that downfield accuracy. And he was good at that in college. I'm a little bit intrigued by Jackson Dart. And I think the funny thing about the Giants organization is that they have just been, a joke, a walking punchline. And especially when they did the Hard Knocks, and then they're talking about don't go to Philadelphia, Saquon Barkley and all that. But I actually think that their management has done some smart things, some really smart things. And not signing Saquon was one of them, because what good would that have done them last year? I'm not even sure it would have done them any good this year. Would have just wasted everybody's time, and Saquon wouldn't have performed like he did. But to draft the quarterback, stack up the defense, draft the superstar wide receiver, I think they're kind of on their way. If Jackson Dart is anything, and still the NFC is the land of who can build the strongest team, and then your quarterback does his job until somebody becomes the next, Mahomes or Allen. The NFC is still, that's what the Vikings are buying with JJ McCarthy. So even though I don't think that Dart has megastar potential, there could be something there in the future as that team builds it up. So I don't dislike what the Giants are doing. And I am kind of intrigued to see if they're 6-8 or something. Like, do they go to him at the end of the season? And then how does he look, and where do they go from there? I don't want to discount the possibility that he could turn out to be a good quarterback for them.
I agree. And Coach Dable used some pretty flattering words, said he was efficient, effective, aggressive, and confident. That's a pretty solid report back from the head coach. If I'm quarterback and I'm hearing that, I'm like, all right, I'm doing the right thing. Like, stay on this trajectory. I do think it's a down the line. This is not an immediate kind of thing for him. It's a let's develop him, keep it going, but definitely someone to keep an eye out for. I think intrigued is the key word here.
And as a coach speak expert, I always look for just how specific a coach is. Like if they're not pleased, they'll say, "Well, they're going to keep working and showing up every day." And you're like, okay, but did you like anything about it? But that sounds like Brian Dable was pretty pleased with that.
Yeah, I would agree. Someone else who stood out, had a great showing, Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. I think I personally was not seeing all that much hype about this guy. I think he was kind of quiet coming out, which is funny. He's from Alabama, but he had a pretty good performance. He's very mobile, very agile. I think those were two things that a lot of scouts noticed from his Alabama performance, and it's translated well into his rookie showing. But he also has a great arm. He's just very raw. I think there's a lot of room for potential. A lot of people are saying he has a really high ceiling, but we got to wait and see if he can get there. Like, we can see where he could go, but let's see how long it's going to take. Obviously, he's going to be back up behind Sam Darnold. Sam will be playing, I would assume, starting this season. And we know that he had a standout performance last year. So he's going to learn a lot. He's going to be in a good position to develop, but it was cool to see him break out and kind of make more of a name for himself early on.
In terms of pure athleticism and arm strength, Milroe is the best quarterback in the entire draft, other than Cam Ward, but maybe even including Cam Ward, because he can absolutely sling it. And his speed, I don't know if he ran at the combine, but he would have run probably a 4.3 something, 4.4 something, just an explosive, incredible athlete. But playing the quarterback position, I feel like for a guy like Milroe, the preseason is perfect for him because he doesn't have to deal with anything complex from defenses, and guys are going to be open and the defenses are going to play vanilla. When you saw him in college, he would kind of just pick somewhere to throw the football and it was going there no matter what. And he is a project, somebody who needs multiple years. But actually, I was thinking about him through the lens of like an Anthony Richardson. Richardson was drafted so high that the Colts were like, oh, we've got to put him in right away. And they did not develop him. They did not give him time. And then, no surprise, he's in over his head at the beginning of his career. He gets hurt. He gets setbacks. And for Milroe, this might be the absolute best thing he could have dreamed of. I'm sure he was disappointed that he wasn't a first-round draft pick, but to end up as something like a third-round pick and then sit behind Darnold for a couple years, he's a guy you truly could see showing up in a couple years. It kind of reminds me of like Malik Willis, who's turned into a good backup for the Packers and may someday get his chance. But Willis wasn't ready. He was just a great athlete with a great arm who needed to learn how to really play football and try to harness all that talent. But I'm going to keep an eye on Milroe. I think that Seahawks fans want to see him sooner than later because they know there's a ceiling on Sam Darnold. But I would just say patience, everyone. Give the guy time to learn how to play, and maybe you've got something there.
Agreed. He needs time to cook, He's got to develop the skills, figure it out. Someone who I think, obviously, coming out the gate is going to be good and has proved it. First overall draft pick, Cam Ward. They're throwing him right into the fire here. But he went 5 of 8, 67 yards, 89.1 passer rating in his first performance against the Buccaneers. So, yeah, they lost, but he was only in for a little bit, and he had a pretty solid showing. Again, I think all these rookies that I'm saying kind of just like piqued your interest a little bit. And we're like, all right, I can see what the scouts are seeing now because I've heard about it and I've read about it because I'm consuming football, as anyone in your audience is. But to see it in action in real time with real NFL players, I don't care if they're third stringers, that's fine. Just kind of shows you like what these guys have and where they can improve. So for me, I thought he did pretty solid.
Was it Kyle Brandt who went on a big rant after the draft about Cam Ward not getting any attention at all?
Yes.
It's just continued to be true.
Yes.
And your friends over there with the schedule makers did not give us a whole heck of a lot of Cam Ward for the national TV audience. We're just going to have to see the highlights from the number 1 overall draft pick. He is truly the least hyped number 1 overall draft pick quarterback that I have ever seen in my entire life. And I actually think that's great for him. That's a terrible team. I don't know that coach knows what he's doing. Their receivers are bad. They might have a decent run game and offensive line, but I think they got another running back hurt the other day. They are in tough for Cam Ward. So if he survives this year and shows some guts and plays okay, then I think that you're going to be talking about a team to pay attention to in the future. But as of right now, I understand why there hasn't been any attention, because they're just not a relevant franchise really at all until they prove that they are. And Cam Ward also seemed like, and I think he's a good prospect, but he's not a great prospect. And he probably would have gone as the fourth or fifth quarterback the year before, which I also think impacted the amount of hype, where it was like, yeah, he's number one overall, but is he really? Or did they just absolutely have to draft someone number one overall? But he's got a good arm. His arm is seriously live. And I think he's going to be kind of fun to watch in his first year, if I ever see him.
The poor scheduling team really did you zero favors there. And as a long-suffering Titans fan myself, my parents are also disappointed. However, I think something that stood out about him that I've read about and seen is his work ethic. I think that kind of sets him apart from other people. And it's really cliche to say, oh, he has a really strong work ethic. But this kid really is coming in. He's the first one in the mornings. He's putting in the extra time. He's asking coaches extra questions. He's staying late. He's doing what he can to differentiate himself. But yeah, I agree. It was a weak quarterback class. I think everyone knew that. So played into the lack of hype. But also he's a humble guy. So I think he's almost comfortable in this space of like, I don't need all that gas right now. Like, I'm good. I'm here to do what I'm going to do. And I'm going to learn from it and then develop, versus Caleb Williams, who's just on the cover of everything, interviewing everyone. You know what color his nails are on a given Wednesday. I think it's kind of helpful to just have a low-key start into the league and then build yourself up. I don't think we do guys favors when we overhype them coming in. Think of Shedeur Sanders, prime example, So I think he's happy with this slow entry.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that there are certain markets where it's not as hard to come into the NFL. You talk about Chicago. I think it's probably just a really big coincidence, kind of like how if you call heads or tails flipping a coin, you're supposed to get it 50% of the time, but you'll probably make or miss 10 in a row and be like, well, how did that happen? So I think Chicago's just been on the wrong side of that. But I also think that it breaks people mentally at the quarterback position because they have no time to develop. And Caleb Williams, based on his skills and his issues, I think in any other place, they would have wanted him to sit for half the season. Maybe not the whole year, but kind of like Drake May did, where just get the sense of it. But in Chicago, no way. They've had way too many busts, way too much bad history. They had a coach who was trying to save himself. I think that Cam Ward is coming into a position where he doesn't have that kind of pressure. He just has no one to help him play football, which will be a major part of the trouble.
That could be a small issue, but that's for him to figure out later in the season and for us to watch at 1 p.m. on a given Sunday. So something else I wanted to talk about. Unfortunate here. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but we've had some injuries taking out some key players. Namely, Jordan Love is getting a surgery. Matthew Stafford has messed up his back. I want to talk about it. We're going to run through my IR list that I've kind of compiled of the top guys who we're not going to see either early on or for the whole season. Let's kick it off. We're Minnesota fans here. Rondale Moore. KOC called this one a heartbreaker. That's exactly what it is. He just signed a 1-year deal with the Minnesota Vikings and now has out for the rest of the out for the rest of the season after dislocating his right knee at training camp. Is that correct?
Last year he dislocated it. Yes. Yeah. We don't know the specific injury, but it was a very serious leg injury that's going to keep him out the rest of the year. And it was extremely sad to see him go down. It was the first play that he got the ball. The dislocated knee happened last year, at least that Matt Daniels had said that that's what his injury was. It was never officially announced, but he was out for the entire season, had to recover, and then came back and still had his burst and looked like he was going to carve out a role for himself. And then he ends up going down right away. There's only one way to describe it. It was just crushing. You could hear the pin drop in the stadium. All of his teammates came out when he was on the cart. It was tough. And this is why you don't see coaches play some of their starters, because that's a loss for them. And he needed it coming off the injury to get back into the game. But one play gets taken down the wrong way. It wasn't anything he did wrong. He was just headed toward the sideline, got dragged down. And that's it for his season. Football can be brutal that way.
Yeah, that one was hard to watch. Another one, this is top of mind for a lot of people. Jordan Love is undergoing surgery for his left thumb. There's a ligament that he injured. They didn't give us any more detail, but he's taking this next week off to get this surgery to repair it. And then they said he'll be back for week 1, but he won't attend joint practice with the Colts, won't be up for that game. But the Packers GM sounded very confident in a press conference saying, no, he'll be back. He'll be ready. We just got to get this taken care of. I want to say I can empathize, not to make this about me, but I also tore a ligament in my left thumb. That's hard when you got to catch a ball and you have to direct it. And that's a hard ligament to have messed up. So serious injury, but it sounds like they're going to get it taken care of. And if it's getting taken care of now, hopefully it's not remaining and hanging over him the rest of the season.
Yeah, what I wondered about Jordan Love was just his injuries last year set him back. And is that going to be the case again? Because when you hear thumb, and there might be more than one ligament, so I don't know if it's the same one that you had happen to your thumb, but if it's, you're talking about your hand, that doesn't exactly start Jordan Love out on a great path here. And sometimes, injuries can just come for certain people. And he had that happen last year where there was multiple injuries and it did set him back. And I think this is an enormous year for Jordan Love. Maybe just because the way they're talking about it, it is nothing and we'll never remember that he had this little surgery and everything is fine. But if it does plague him in any way in terms of the accuracy, the release of the football, whatever it might be, and he's impacted again, I mean, they're going to be looking around going, we signed this guy to an enormous contract and he's not quite what we wanted him to be, because they decided after that first year that he was the next Aaron Rodgers. He's been good, but he hasn't been the next Aaron Rodgers. And if he's going to have some injuries, I hate the term injury prone because you kind of are until you're not. Like, you have bad things happen to you, and then if you don't, then you're not, right? Rondale Moore, is he injury prone or just unlucky? And that might be the same thing for Jordan Love from last year. But if this affects the way that he throws, he's already not like the most perfect, pristine passer. He's kind of all gas and no brakes when it comes to the way he plays. So if it's a slow start for him as he's recovering from a surgery, the Packers could fall behind. It is a really darn good division.
It's a really good division. This also does feel like you were saying, like a make or break year for him. Like, prove yourself now and cement yourself as like, no, this is what I'm here to do. I've grown and I'm here. Or if it's a slow start, as you're alluding to, like, that's hard. The game moves fast and people want to win games and they want to win divisions. And if this isn't your year, it wasn't your year, truthfully, like the past 3. So, it's almost like at some point, rubber hits the road. You got to prove yourself. And this does feel like a very impactful season for him. And I hope for his sake that this isn't a problem and we can get past it, but it's definitely something to keep an eye out for.
And on the Stafford side of things, that's another one. I mean, one, if the Vikings were thinking they could get a hold of the Rams' backup quarterback, if they're looking for a QB swap or something, I don't know if that's going to happen now with Stafford. What I can't figure out is Matthew Stafford for his entire career has been dinged up. It's been one thing after next. He's one of the toughest quarterbacks out there, but also kind of perpetually on the injury report. And it's always something, it's a back, it's a shoulder, it's whatever he's kind of grinding through. But that adds up after a while. He had a great year last year in the second half, obviously played really well in the playoffs against the Vikings and against the Eagles. But that's somebody who has just compiled a ton of injuries over the years. And you do have to wonder, with a team that is really excellent from top to bottom in Los Angeles, is he going to be healthy enough? Because last year, it's so interesting, like Mike Sando's quarterback tier list, people around the league had him as a first-tier quarterback, and I respect the heck out of him, but I didn't think that last year for the majority of the season. And now you're asking him to try to lead them deep into the playoffs again, starting out with an injury. I think that raises a lot of questions in another division that's got some pretty good teams.
I also want to highlight, it's not just like any casual injury. This man has an aggravated disc in his back and he's 37. He was taking epidurals before games and practices just to manage the pain. That sounds serious to me. I don't have a doctor background, but if I'm taking an epidural for any sort of pain, it means I am not messing around. So then I'm expected to go out and play with potentially getting hitting the ground. come back up doing it again. You question his durability here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, going forward, like once you get to a certain age, you are always kind of on like injury or fall off watch. And I think he's kind of blinking red right now when it
Mhm.
comes to that. As you said, I mean, when you're having to go through serious things to even get back on the field, I thought that Matthew Stafford was going to retire. It just made sense to me. Like they
Mhm.
went deep in the playoffs, or they got a playoff win, and you sort of end mostly on top. He won the Super Bowl already, but maybe one of those guys that is going to have to kind of be dragged off the field at some point. Like he certainly is a gamer and he's a warrior, but I'm just wondering, like, is this the time it finally catches up to him?
Yeah, and also at some point, I don't want to just break beat this down, but you're also a human being and you have a life outside of football. Like at what point you have a family and kids, you still want to be able to play with them. You got an aggravated back. It's always in the back of my head when I'm thinking about the older guys with serious injuries. Is like, okay, you've done great. You have done more than enough. You have cemented yourself in NFL history. Let's back it up. Let's end on a high note.
Right. I hurt my back moving a couple years ago. Terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Debilitating.
It is the worst, like, to have a back injury, like even just standing up and like it's frozen, whatever it might be. Anybody who's had a back injury knows it is awful to try to deal with. It's not like, oh, you throw your arm in a sling and you'll be good in 2 months, because it could come out of nowhere. You could just be, oh, I'm just going to get up from the couch, and then all of a sudden it seizes up on you. I feel for you, Matt Stafford. We have the exact same injury history where I hurt myself picking up a box and you hurt yourself from 20 years of football.
It's the Matthews. I don't know.
Yeah, we're exactly the same. I also throw the ball just as hard. Yeah,
I'm sure you do. Yeah, absolutely. I want to wrap this segment up, though. We just came off some injuries. Bad news. Let's lighten it up a little bit. The Green Bay Packers kicker. I love a good story, and this is a great one. This guy, Mark McNamee, had never played American football, had not played in the NFL until this game this past weekend. He played in the Canadian Football League and previously was a goalkeeper for a league in Ireland. But his journey here has been nothing short of incredible. So he signed for the team in July 22nd, 2025, so very recently. And there were immigration issues. The Packers even hired an immigration lawyer to try to get him overseas faster. He started playing soccer, obviously, kicking a ball, very different soccer-wise. Ball is circular, hit comes off your foot differently, but the basics are the same. You know how to kick a ball for distance, for height. I was a goalkeeper. It's hard, but it's not that hard. So he started training for the NFL back in 2023. And by 2025, he was signed to a pro team. So he qualified for the Irish kicking competition, which is a real thing, after training with a personal trainer. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers had a game abroad and they hosted a kicking clinic in Ireland. He got some looks there and he was like, all right, I should pursue this. Quit his full-time job. This is just a normal schmegular guy, and committed to training for the combine. And he came over through the IPP, which is an international player pathway that the NFL has. He had a pretty good showing. And again, he got some looks, but people were really hesitant. This kid has never played football before. You can be great, but being great in this setting and being great on an NFL field in a real game, different things. So no one signed him. It was kind of crickets. Signed with the CFL and then got released. Because again, they were like, you seem good, but not great. And we don't want to take a risk on you. So he goes back to Ireland, continues training. This is a story of so much tenacity. Anyway, was signed with the Packers in July and then had 3 kickoffs in this preseason game and is now a fully rostered NFL kicker. And I think that is a phenomenal story.
It is. And my only reaction to that is I know that someday your guy, RG, Roger Goodell, will make an 18-game season and they will take away another preseason game. But I hope the preseason never dies, because you just never know what guy is going to completely come out of nowhere and shock you. Isn't the Dallas Cowboys kicker? Wasn't that guy a similar story? Soccer player who just decided he wanted to play. There was the guy from Detroit, Jake Bates, who was in the XFL or UFL, and then they signed him because he was hitting 60-yard bombs. I mean, you just never know who's going to show up and make a name for themselves in a preseason game and carve out some sort of career. Maybe he probably won't make the team, but maybe somebody else's kicker gets hurt and they pick him up and they give him a shot and he kicks a game-winning field goal or something. These stories can only live with the preseason. They would not be trying out the kicker from Ireland if it was not in the preseason. But it does remind me of one time that the Vikings made a trade for a kicker / punter by the name of Corey Vedvik. And there was some thought that he might be the first guy in the league recently, since the ball is the current shape, since the forward pass, to be a kicker and punter and only take up one roster spot. Unfortunately, he couldn't do either. not at this level. I mean, he could certainly kick it farther than any of us, but he did not kick very accurately, and he outkicked his coverage and gave up a punt return for touchdown, and that was the end of the Corey Vedvik story. But for one day, Mike Zimmer sat at his golf cart and told local reporters, including myself, that there was a chance that he could kick and punt. So
that's like a 2-in-1 shampoo. Like, you have really high expectations for it, and you're like, this could save me so much time and money. This is awesome. And it never works out quite the way you expect, you know?
I don't know, but I've never tried a 2-in-1 shampoo, but I will keep that in mind for the future if I consider it. Maggie Robinson, another great segment from you around the NFL during the preseason here, and certainly a noticeable change from the lack of headlines when you started in early July, but these segments are great, and I'm super glad that we can do them. So thank you for your time as always. Great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.